The wind howled through the crumbling ruins of the old railway station, carrying with it the faint scent of rust and rain. A man in a worn brown coat walked along the cracked platform, his boots splashing through puddles. His name was Samuel Reid, a name that meant nothing to anyone now, though once, long ago, it had been whispered in the streets of a city that no longer remembered him. It was November, 50 years since the end of the war that had torn the country apart. Samuel, now in his 70s, had come back to the place where his life had changed forever. In his hand, he clutched a faded photograph, a group of young men in uniform, their faces bright with courage and dreams. All of them were gone now, except him. The story of Samuel Reid was never written in the history books. There were no medals bearing his name, no statues standing in city squares. Yet it was he who had made the decision that saved thousands of lives, a decision buried under secrecy and silence. In the spring of 1975, Samuel was a railway engineer in the city of Darlington. The war had reached its height, and the army had taken over much of the railway system for transporting troops and supplies. Samuel was not a soldier. He had been rejected for service because of an old leg injury, but his knowledge of the railways made him invaluable. One night, a train came in under the cover of darkness. It wasn't on the schedule. The wagons were sealed, guarded by armed men who bore no insignia. Samuel was ordered to repair a section of track so the train could continue its journey by morning. But something about the train troubled him. The guards were nervous, whispering to each other in low tones. The air smelled faintly of chemicals. When he asked what was inside the wagons, the officer in charge told him curtly to mind his own business. But Samuel couldn't. He was a quiet man, yet his conscience was loud. That night, after the guards dozed off in the station office, he crept along the train with his lantern. He found a loose plank in one of the cars and pried it open. What he saw froze his breath. Dozens of civilians were packed inside, men, women, children. Their eyes were wide and hollow, their faces pale in the flickering light. They begged him not to make a sound. Samuel shut the plank quickly and stepped back, heart pounding. He had heard rumors of people being relocated for security reasons, but now he knew the truth. The train wasn't carrying supplies. It was carrying human lives to their deaths. He stood there for a long time, rain beginning to fall on his shoulders, knowing that if he spoke, he'd be shot for treason. But if he stayed silent, hundreds would die. By dawn, he had made his choice. Samuel sabotaged the track ahead, carefully loosening bolts and misaligning the rails, just enough to derail the train, but not enough to kill those inside. When the train left at sunrise, it made it only a few miles before grinding to a halt in a deep ravine, unharmed but immovable. The guards panicked. In the confusion that followed, local villagers, warned by Samuel hours earlier, swarmed down from the hills, overpowered the soldiers, and freed the captives. But Samuel never got to see it. The army arrested him before noon. He spent the next 6 years in a prison camp, accused of sabotage, espionage, and treason. They never believed his story that he acted out of conscience. No one did. The war ended before he was ever formally tried, and by the time he was released, the new government had no interest in old records or forgotten prisoners. He returned to his home, only to find it in ruins, his parents dead, and the world moving on without him. He found work as a mechanic, changed his name to avoid questions, and lived quietly in the shadows of the city he had once saved. The people he had freed were scattered across the country, starting new lives, unaware of the man who had risked everything for them. Now, half a century later, Samuel stood once again at the old railway station. The rails were rusted and broken, the sign half fallen, but in his mind he could still hear the whistle of the train and the pounding of his heart that night. He sat on a bench, the photograph trembling in his hands. "It's strange," he murmured, "how a man can save lives and still be forgotten." A voice behind him said softly, "Not by everyone." He turned. A woman in her 30s stood there holding a bunch of white lilies. She had dark eyes and a calm, steady look, something familiar about her face. "You're Samuel Reid, aren't you?" He blinked. "I was once. Who are you?" "My grandmother told me about you," the woman said, smiling faintly. "She was on that train. She said a man with kind eyes and a limp helped save them. She never knew your name, but she told us to remember him, to remember the man who stopped the train." His throat tightened. He hadn't realized he was crying until he felt the tears on his hands. "Your grandmother, she lived?" "She did. She had a family. I'm part of that family. There are dozens of us now, because of you." For a long moment, Samuel couldn't speak. The years of silence, of shame and loneliness seemed to lift from his shoulders. The wind carried away the weight of all he had endured. The woman placed the lilies on the ground by the tracks. She said, "We come here every year. My mother, my brothers, my cousins. We bring flowers for the ones who didn't make it, and for the one who saved the rest. We never knew you were still alive." He smiled faintly. "Neither did I." That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Samuel walked along the tracks one last time. The sky glowed orange and gold, and in that fading light he felt at peace. The world had forgotten his name, but not his deed. It had found its way through generations, carried in stories told at dinner tables and whispered at bedtime. When the wind rose again, it was softer, gentler, as if the world itself was saying, "Thank you." Samuel Reid died a few months later, quietly, in his sleep. When the city learned of his story, told by the family of the woman who had found him, there was no parade, no grand ceremony. But in the small town of Darlington, beside the ruins of the old railway station, a modest plaque was placed. It read simply, "Here stood Samuel Reid, who chose courage over silence and saved the lives of many. His name may have been forgotten by history, but not by humanity." And so, at last, the untold story of a forgotten hero was told.